Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us. Great to have you with us on the program. As mentioned, our special guest today is Yvonne Heath. She's been a nurse for over 25 years, a nurse with a mission to help bring death out of the darkness and into conversations and to create a culture of acceptance with less fear. Her book is called Love Your Life to Death, How to Plan and Prepare for End of Life so you can live fully now. Yvonne, welcome to the program. Great to have you with us on the show today.
Thank you so much, Rick. I appreciate having me on the show.
You know, it's interesting the journey you took as a nurse, going through that and deciding I really need, because of my experiences, to write this book. Let's talk about the path in nursing that you saw, because you say that you really weren't able to help the people deal with grief, let go, because you were never trained to do that. In fact, it took its toll on you as well. What did you see during that period that finally you realized, I can really be helpful here and I need to write this book?
Well, Rick, it's interesting because as you are trained, healthcare professionals are trained very well to help people to live well. But as far as helping people to die well, when I did my training back in 1988, I don't really remember a whole lot of that training at all. And so, you just kind of learn as you go along. But when somebody did die, which of course in my career happened more times than I can count, we just sort of brushed it off and carried on and, kind of checked in like, is everybody okay? And had a little dialogue and then moved forward. And I realized that, I worked in 10 different hospitals. I'm not pointing fingers. It wasn't any better or worse in one place or the other. But it was the same everywhere. In the States, I worked in Texas and Louisiana and New York State, many hospitals in Ontario. And we were all trained to help people to live well and not to die well. And it really, really hit me when I worked in a chemotherapy clinic for 10 years. And we would help people, but people would be dying and no one was really talking about it, including the patient or the families, the doctors or anyone. And, because we're all busy trying to fix everything,
right,
even when a cure wasn't to be had. So I felt more and more anxious in that. And so I stepped back and had to have a look at that.
In the book, you have a quote, "If we prepare, we suffer less and grief is coming. Whether we talk about it or not, grief is going to come and we better be prepared. And as you say, if you prepare for it, you can live life fully now." You open the book, and the book is called Love Your Life to Death, How to Plan and Prepare for End of Life so you can live fully now. Our guest on This Week in America is the author, Yvonne Heath. Her website is loveyourlifetodeath.com. Information on the book there. The book's available all across the country. And you can go to our website, of course, thisweekinamerica.us, and link on directly to Yvonne's website. Let's talk about, at the beginning of the book, you talk about Homer. And even though you didn't know him, you talk about the story. And this really talks about the impact it has not only on the person who's facing the end of their life, but family members as well. Tell us about that story, because it really is doing things the right way.
Mm-hmm. So when I first started the thought of writing a book, which was completely out of left field, I had not even so much as journaled, and suddenly I was like, that's it, I'm going to write a book. And I didn't want to research and have surveys and stats. I wanted people's stories. I didn't know if anyone would share their stories with me at all, but one of the nurses that I worked with in an emergency department drove to my house one night and said, not even really sure why I'm here, but I'm going to share the story, my dad's story, and my journey with my father as he went through living and dying. And it was the most extraordinary story of, Homer, who lived his life very fully despite having lost his vision at the age of 17, and he married, had 5 children, and he lived his life so fully. And then when he knew that a cure was no longer to be had when he was ill, he said, that's it, no more treatment, it's time to plan my death. And as he did that, he involved his family, and he had lockets engraved for his daughters, and he picked out a suit because it was hesitation, and he even had his daughter practice a eulogy he wrote. So when Homer was dying, all I had to do was to be there with him, and after he died, they could move through the grieving process, and it was so extraordinary, and it became the introduction in my book because I was just so taken with his story, and I thought, wow, imagine that is what I would consider a good death, and imagine if we all planned our lives and the end of our lives like this, we would suffer less in our dying process, and our families would, our families need to live on
Right.
without us. And if we could prepare them for that, what an extraordinary gift.
And you talk about Sue, the daughter, who at the end is saying, we didn't go through the debates. We didn't go through last-minute decisions. And we know how that happens when somebody comes in from out of town. You haven't seen them in a year and a half, but they want to have some input as to what's going to happen. And you didn't have that worry because it's all laid out. Like you said, he had the eulogy. He had them practice to make sure they didn't add extra words because he wanted to read this way. He even checked his tie to make sure the knot was okay for the visitation. So it was planned down that way. Yes, it was planned down that way. And it really was a relief for everybody. In fact, she called it a gentle passing and thought that was sort of God's way of saying, you did this the right way.
That's right. And, for healthcare professionals as well, which, again, when I stepped away from my career, I realized when you witness, families have been destroyed over different people thinking or wanting different things when someone is dying and mom didn't want this or dad didn't want that and we shouldn't be doing this. And literally families are destroyed. And often they end up never speaking to each other again. And how awful, you have a death in the family and at a time you should be comforting each other. You're not speaking to your sister anymore. And I've witnessed that over and over and over. So the fact that I now I'm a little tough love with people and saying, it is actually our responsibility to plan our lives and the end of lives. And so we could eliminate that excessive suffering because we have to grieve. That's how we heal. But, the excessive suffering, we cause ourselves.
The book is called Love Your Life to Death, How to Plan and Prepare for End of Life so you can live life fully now. The author is Yvonne Heath, our guest on This Week in America. The website is loveyourlifetodeath.com. Information on the book available there as well as other great information. You can link on directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Let's talk about the talk. Sue got to that point where, okay, I have to bring it up. Now's the time to do that. Why have the talk, and how difficult is it to get to that point where I need to bring this up now?
Well, I have to say, people usually wait until they are facing, the dying process or diagnosis. And I'll tell you, Rick, it is so much more difficult when people wait for that point. So the first page of my book, I said, the best time to talk about plan and prepare for grief, death, and dying is when we are young and healthy. And the next best time is now. And when I say now, I mean, let's not procrastinate. I don't mean Christmas morning or somebody's birthday or something, because, that's sort of inappropriate. But we certainly tend to procrastinate. But I've walked my own talk and I've done it in my own life. And I wrote about that in the book, how I planned my own life and end of life. And it also makes you really stop and reflect, geez, am I really doing, what I want to do now in my the part of living fully, so that I know I will not die with regret no matter when I die, because I am living my passion, and every day I try to live my life fully, knowing that I have no idea when I'm going to die, and I don't live in that bubble of denial. So I've planned my life. My husband and I have spoken to it. Our children are very involved in this process. We have a 21-year-old who lives out west, Tyler, and we've talked to him about organ donation. And, if you plan first and then talk to the people who, the conversation will be a little easier, and then move forward to the tougher people, you can really empower yourself and empower others. And it's really changed my life. And I wish I had done this many years ago.
Well, you talk about the peace of mind it brings everybody, because you don't have to worry about what's going to happen in the fights and would he have wanted it this way, that type of thing. The peace of mind, and also something else in the chapter where you're talking about why have the talk, something you really sort of forget about is overlooked finances. There are a lot of practical reasons to do this ahead of time as well, so you're not tied up in court for 5 or 6 years. And again, one of those situations where you end up with family members not talking to each other.
It happens every single day over and over. And how sad for everyone. I mean, truly, how sad. And again, as I was saying, when, Homer, it was a good death, and Homer left with peace of mind, knowing that he had taken care of all those things for his family. His family had peace of mind, knowing that, well, they honored his wishes because he made them known. They didn't have to think about that. But, for doctors and nurses and the social workers and everybody else who were involved in his dying process, they could walk away and, yes, grieve with a heavy heart, but smile at how incredible the end of his life, that journey was. And again, what a gift for everyone, and everyone is empowered. And we really, as a society, we tend to put it off to the very bitter end. And we plan everything. We plan parties, we plan festivals and weddings and births. We certainly plan. And the most difficult part of this journey to navigate, and the most painful, really, for obviously many of us, is end of life, and we plan it the least, and it really doesn't make sense.
Yvonne Heath, our guest on the program, author of the book Love Your Life to Death, How to Plan and Prepare for End of Life so you can live life fully now. Her website is loveyourlifetodeath.com. You talk a lot about the death phobic society and our reluctance to openly discuss. Why do you think that is? And you talk in the book about the role of media in this. And we used to be able to sort of naturally age through the whole life cycle. Now, if you watch TV, nobody's over 40 years old. We're sort of frozen in time, and I guess we don't think that we're aging.
Well, there's so many reasons. And part of the book, again, I said, I don't want to point fingers at anyone, but I said, why have we become so death phobic? Why have we become scared to death of death? And there are many reasons, and it's nobody's fault. It's just kind of how our society evolved. And truly, there was once upon a time, we all lived on farms, and life and death were just a part of everyday life with animals. And also, we were multi-generational. We all lived in the same farm or complex. We all lived together. And so our children witnessed the aging process with our elders, and they were also revered, and they lived among us. And so the children in all the ages saw grandma getting, whatever age they lived to. It was a part of just natural life. And we didn't have excessive medical technology to keep people alive into their 90s and beyond. And so, when our elders became ill and the doctor tried to help, with limited resources, but when that was not successful, you cared for your dying at home, and then they died at home. And they were laid out in the parlor, and, for people to come and pay their respects, and we prepared the body so that we've sanitized our society, and we're able to, now our elderly live in nursing homes or don't live among us. And most people, 70% of people still die in the hospital. People may or may not visit. The children may or may not visit, especially if it's an intensive care unit. Children don't come. And then the person who died will be picked up by the funeral home, taken to the funeral home. The children may or may not go to the funeral. So we're not exposed to it. And of course it scares us. So why are we going to go out of our way to be a part of that? We're just not comfortable with it. And that's another thing, I say to people, we don't get comfortable with it. You have to be okay with being uncomfortable and just show up. Just show up and be a part of it. But we just need to sort of get back to that a little. You've
discussed in the program, and you talk in the book about how you decided, okay, I'm going to confront this. We're going to sit down. We're going to have the talk and work things out. A couple minutes left in the program. Talk about the feeling after first of all, was there reluctance even on your part to sit down and discuss this? When you started talking about it's not somebody else's mortality you're talking about, it's your mortality and what will happen when I'm not here anymore. Was that difficult to face? And then once you did, what was the feeling like when, wow, everybody now understands what I want and how this whole thing should fit together?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny because at the end of my book, I wrote a poem called If I Die Today by Yvonne Heath. and I still cry when I read it. But, it's the legacy that I want to leave for my children. I want them to know that I've lived a full life, and I have no desire to die anytime soon. But I want them to know that I will not die with regrets whenever that is. And we talk about that I'll be a spirit in the sky and we'll always be able to stay connected, love never dies, etc. So it was sort of an emotional journey to, really truly face my mortality. And I told my kids so many times, Jaden and Tanner, we have 10-year-old twins, and I told them so many times, we'll stay connected. They kind of said, I know, Mom, when you die, you're going to be a spirit. We'll be connected. I get it. And I'm saying, well, I'm glad you get it, because I don't, I want you to understand this about life and death. So it was an emotional journey, but it was truly empowering after. And I know that I have, I've given my children the best tools possible to move forward in whatever may be. And my family, it's been a big relief for all of us. And we've made a pact that in 2016, we're really going to cross our T's and dot our I's and make sure we all, really know what each other needs, wants, and of course, for the people left behind, that's who it's most important for. And take care of all the little nitty gritty, the paperwork, to make sure we have it all in order so that we could live fully and know we've planned our lives right to the end of life. And I feel pretty good about that.
It's interesting as you read stories, a number of personal stories in the book that Yvonne writes about, that transformation from fear of death and putting it off like it's not going to happen if I don't think about it, to suddenly this great feeling of relief. It's almost like what an amazing feeling when it's over, because you've accomplished something that's going to be beneficial to you and beneficial to your family members and friends.
Absolutely. I think it's one of the greatest gifts we can give each other, because again, it is one of the most difficult, when somebody you love dies, grief it's a lot, and it's all encompassing. And I just feel like it is one of the best things we can do for each other. It's our responsibility. And, I also talk about we need to create compassionate communities and take care of each other through this, because we need to bring it back to community and help each other through this grieving and loss and everything, because grief is coming. So it takes a village. I say it takes a village to support the ill, the caregiver, the dying, the bereaved, and each other. And we need to get back to that.
I said in the beginning, I used one of the quotes in the book. We'll close with that. If we prepare, we suffer less, and grief is coming. Our guest on This Week in America, and we will have Yvonne back, Yvonne Heath. She is the author of the book, Love Your Life to Death, How to Plan and Prepare for End of Life so you can live fully now. Her website is loveyourlifetodeath.com. Information on Yvonne, a lot of great information, of course, on the book at the website. And you can link on directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Yvonne, it's a very important book. Thank you so much for being with us on the program, and we look forward to having you back with us.
Thank you so much, Rick. I appreciate it, and I look forward to chatting again.
And Yvonne will be back with us. Once again, the book is called Love Your Life to Death, How to Plan and Prepare for End of Life so you can live fully now. Information, of course, available at our website, thisweekinamerica.us.